Hi, welcome to LiTup 365 Spring Session 3, The Nature of Evolution. I love the conversation we're about to have. I'm really excited about it. So today what we're talking about is how our brains work like bees. And this was something I ran across incidentally. I mean, we're talking about vision this month, so I just want to share this really quickly. It was really funny. I had this feeling, this internal inspiration that I need to watch TV when it was like a Saturday afternoon. And I didn't know why. I never watched TV. I didn't even have cable or at that point Hulu, Netflix, any of those. I just had I had one of those boxes that picked up the local channels. So I had maybe 10 channels that it would actually receive. And I just thought, oh, I need to watch TV. And I didn't know why. I had other things I could do. I could go for a hike. I could do so many things, but I thought, I just need to watch it. And I turned on the TV and nothing was on. Nothing that I wanted to watch. There were things on, but I didn't want to watch any of them. And I was flipping through the channels going, why did I feel prompted to watch TV? This is so silly. And then I just felt it again. And I felt like I should watch one of the public broadcast stations. I checked both, and one had something on that was good enough. I mean, it was a play or something that I might like to watch, but I don't know. I didn't feel very inspired by it, and so I turned to the other one, and there was a kids show on, and I thought, this is silly. Why was I prompted to do this? And I went to turn off the TV, and I heard the announcer say, "Okay, kids, we're going to go to break, but when we come back, we're going to talk about how your brains work like bees." And I went, what? And I froze and I watched it. I was so excited about what I learned. This is how a lot of the things I've learned about the brain have come to me, just in being inspired to search a word or turn on a channel or read a certain book. And it's given me just that next bit of information I needed. So what they showed in this documentary was about how, okay, our brains, each individual neuron has little intelligence on its own. What happens with the brain is you have this neuron, and then there's a notch protein that connects those two neurons. And intelligence is how many of those neurons we can use simultaneously. So once the neurons notch, they can be used together. And what happens with them is this neuron has this certain intelligence. So say this neuron's really good at math. And this neuron's kind of good at math, but not quite as good as this neuron. And when those neurons notch, when they link together, this neuron loses all its math capability and fosters something else it's better at. And so now you, as a person, has this math neuron, and that whatever this neuron decides to be, say it's art, that can work at the same time. And this is what increases our IQ, our intelligence quotients, is that ability to notch neurons together. And so in this documentary, they were talking about how bees work the same way in a hive. So a single bee is not that intelligent. You see this if one gets in your house and finds a window, right? It'll beat against that glass, never realizing that it can get past the glass on its own. So small hives with bees, the bigger the hive, the smarter the hive. They can get highly intelligent to the point where there would be a bee against the glass, and that bee will actually leave the glass to go seek exit elsewhere. It'll try different windows and move around rather than just get stuck at that one. And that's because of the hive intelligence expands its ability. So in this documentary, the first thing they did is kind of explain. They didn't talk about the notch proteins. I learned about that separately, but when I watched the documentary, it kind of helped the pieces come together in my mind. So the first thing that happens, so what we want to do is talk about when bees rehive, which is what they studied. So they found this island that didn't have any place else on it where bees could naturally hive. So it was a perfect place to test them. And so what they did is, first of all, brought a colony of bees that were ready to rehive. And the first thing they showed is how when bees are rehiving, they're dormant, non-aggressive, right? So the guy actually put his hand in the bees and they didn't sting him because they become non-aggressive. They become passive at that point. And our mind does the same thing when it is exploring new opportunities. So this is what I always talk about that prefrontal cortex. When we're going into that mode of observing something new, of taking in new information, our mind goes quiet and stillness comes over us because we're paying attention. You can see it with animals when they become alert and focus. They stop moving, we freeze, and we start to absorb at a higher rate. Well, the bees are doing the same thing when rehiving, so they're not aggressive. And I think about this all the time when I'm trying to discover something new. I'm notorious when I'm on the brink of a new discovery at walking around going, I don't know, I don't know, I don't know. I just repeat it. People who know me well have seen me do that, where I'm just, I don't know is kind of almost the only thing I could say. I'm like that dormant bee that's waiting for that next hive, that next place to land. And I think our brain does this. It's kind of like it loses its intelligence for a minute because it's ready to expand into something bigger. This is the inhale, that quiet mind, the questioning mind. And so in this documentary, what they did is we're measuring bees and rehiving, and they wanted to measure how bees communicate with each other, and it's very similar to the way our neurons communicate with each other. And so these they did this study where they took the bees and they built two different little houses to represent places for the bees to rehive, and there was no place else on the island they could rehive, so it became a perfect scenario where they could observe because they only had a choice between these two places. And one of the houses they painted blue and one they painted yellow. And what the bees do is send out scouts. So a few of the bees are scouts, and their job is to look for better hives when the bees are outgrowing their hive. And so they took these scouts went out, and when they were rehiving, so what they do is they'd fly out and they would fly into the blue house or the yellow house. And when they did, they would, people managing the hives would close the door. They'd go in and they'd put a little paint of color on the back of the bee so they could track it. So if they landed in the blue house, they got a little bit of blue paint on their back. And if they landed in the yellow house, they got a little yellow paint on their back. And then they observed the bees when they went back to the hive. So now I want you to tie this to the brain. So when you're going out and seeking out new information in that observational process, your brain is opening up, and almost like this concept of sending neurons to the prefrontal cortex. It's not physically sending, it's their stem cells and creation, but it's like sending out those bees to search for the piece of information that will bring in and give the brain this new place to expand. And so they watched them when they come out, and this was an interesting part. They watched them when they came back to the hive, and what happened is the bees would shake their tails and buzz, and one hive they had was better than the other. So there was a blue hive and a yellow hive, and one hive was the perfect hive, and the other one was an okay hive. It was adequate. And the bee that came back from the adequate hive would wiggle a couple times and buzz, but not as excitedly as the bee that went to the better hive. So it was almost like the bee was like, well, this one's good. And this one's like, this is better. This is it. This is the one. This is better. And it got to the point where the one bee that had the better hive actually started to attack the other bee and say, no, this is the better one. And in the end, the bees selected the better hive. But this is what happens when new thought comes in. Is the old thought will argue with it. So initially that the bee that had the lesser hive was arguing his point. He was saying, no, I found the place. And the other one had to eventually dominate him to get him to stop. And this is what our neurons are doing. So when that new idea comes in, this is often why our ahas, our new realizations don't stick, is because they're battling ideas of the past. It's kind of like this concept we often say where I was doing this thing and it's just not working anymore. It worked for me so well and it's not working. It doesn't stop working. It's that we've outgrown its ability to work. And that's what we do with thought is we become so attached to the way of a thing. And so one of the biggest problems we have is stuff that we've decided to do for safety. These things become our addictions, our habits that we don't like. I don't usually get into process-driven work, but I am going to introduce a program I have. So if you have anything, I do have a process to break out of it, to kind of be that bee that wins the argument. In case you have anything that's really sticking that you're struggling with, I don't do a ton of process-driven, but I do want to include it this time because it's a great way to transcend any confirmation bias. So it's just a good thing to have handy. But what I really want to look at is the larger hive in this, the macro versus the micro. So beyond thinking of our brain, let's think of our community, right? Because the communal brain works the same as the individual brain. So you can see how someone coming in with a new idea. So for example, what I'm doing, there are those that exist. So for me, I'm not a person that believes you need to get formal education. And I am saying that out loud because I think there is so much to learn in experience. And I think there is so much to learn in looking at something a new way, not being taught the way it already exists, but being able to look at it differently. In fact, that's definitive of who I am. Those boxes, I've studied things for years. I spent years to become a practitioner, to not be the box they taught me to be, but to utilize what I learned there. So for me, studying all these different things I've studied in a formal situation didn't make sense. And I don't think it makes sense for a lot of people today. I think this is a very Z generation concept that I don't need that structure. I don't need this external person telling me who to be. I can get information, I can get ideas, but then I need to decide what I'm going to do with those information and ideas and what they mean to me. That opens up this tremendous possibility. It's often believed to be a big threat, like don't trust people that don't have that. But the truth is, it's not that black and white anymore, right? I mean, you look at a lot of people that have made huge transformation in the world. I love the book Dreamers, Discoverers, and Dynamos because she talks about Edison. Edison trait is, I really connect with that because I have the same thinking patterns as Edison. So I'm a divergent thinker. And that book was really profound for me to realize there's nothing wrong with me. I'm not broken. The way my brain works for me in the same way Edison's worked for him. But he didn't finish school. He didn't go through normal schooling systems. There are a lot of very successful people in the world that have a lot of very powerful things to say that didn't do formal schooling. And that doesn't mean because they didn't do formal schooling that their word isn't important. This is the community the way it is, the established system resisting the new idea. That's what Jesus was. He was the new idea that the established system was resisting. That's Martin Luther King Jr. was. These are why the lives were taken, that these people were crucified, because they were introducing an idea that the idea that already was established. So what's happening in these situations is here comes this bee back that says, no, this is better. And the whole community attacks them. And this is kind of what happens in our brain. It also can happen in our world, that when we have that new idea, we're told not to. And this is a big struggle for children. Children have brilliant, idealistic, innovative minds. And we often say, well, that's wrong. We tell them what they tell us is wrong. And when we were children, this taught us to not trust ourselves. We lost faith in the ideals, the possibility, because we were told, well, that can't be true. It can't happen that way. You just think of all the civil rights movement and the gay rights movement and the women's rights movement. All these rights movements have been about saying, I can be what you're telling me I can't be. I can exist there. It is possible. What Martin Luther King Jr. presented, where we all just live cooperatively in peace, is possible. It's not just possible in my mind, it's likely. It's the direction we're going. So, but we have to remember, so when we're thinking about the larger community people, we don't want to worry about the naysayers and the people that are going to attack us. That's going to happen. I get that all the time. I get people that get so upset with me for teaching what I teach because they say I don't have the right because I didn't follow their formal plans of education. But what we need to do is not focus on that. So we're not focusing on what we're told isn't possible. We want to connect back to that idea of the notch proteins. What brings community together is, and I love this. This is what I wanted to create when I first thought of the self-care sanctuary, was a place where each person was living their vision, but they lived in service to humanity, and that it became a cooperation. That's why I named my book series The Conglomerate. It's this idea of each person have their own unique path, but being able to work harmoniously with others. This is notch proteins, right? I'm really good at this. Oh, you're really good at that. Let's connect. And we improve our intelligence. I use this comparison of political parties because it's so relatable. If we have a complete political party that's one party, doesn't matter which party it is, could be Democrat, could be Republican, but if we get all Republicans or all Democrats in one group here, and then over here we create a group that's one Democrat, one Republican, one Green Party, one Independent, one, all the different parties combined. This is inherently more intelligent than this. A group of neurons is inherently more intelligent than one neuron. One idea versus diversity in idea is always more powerful. That's higher IQ. That's just intelligence by its nature, is being able to see from a broader perspective. So when we translate that from the brain into community, we want to be in this community, but we're not trying to all agree. The Democrat and Republican are not trying to be each other. They're each being steeped in what they are, but they're coming together to expand. So when we look at notch proteins as individual, we want to do what we are good at, right? When I talked about this math neuron isn't trying to be the art neuron or vice versa. This art neuron says, I'm abandoning math. This guy's perfect at it, so I'll focus on art. And they're benefiting each other that way. So we want to do that as people. Now, you're doing your thing and I'm doing my thing. And if we both do our own thing fully, we can come together and create something greater. There was a quote I had at the beginning of LiTup when I first created it. And it was on all of the marketing and everything that I put out. So it was kind of the mission statement of LiTup. And that quote was, we come together to be a conscious participant in our own journey, not just in the enlightenment of ourselves, but by serving the enlightenment of the world around us. The point is not just in being me. It's the way being me organically connects me with others. Eventually, we'll all know this. Eventually we'll all know what the individual knows, but it's healthiest to be the first to know. So not to wait for that trickle down effect, not to wait for the gathering crowds to know, right? So every time a new idea, when medicine first came into play, when Imhotep, go all the way back to some of the origination of medicine in Egypt, and you look at this introduction of it, eventually everyone caught up, right? We don't want to be the last one to know about medicine. We want to be the first one to know. So we want to notch together and also to know within ourselves the thing we're creating. So eventually everyone knew about meditation, but those people that knew about meditation first got to feel peace for longer. So it's kind of that. We want to be in that connective place, not pushing against it. So again, we want to connect to that idea of feeling successful. So creating that internal definition and living from that definition so we can feel successful. That is what the reverse goal setting is about. The reverse goal setting that we've been doing is about stepping into who we are to raise our value base, which then drives the chemical, right? So that we move more naturally. through those evolutionary cycles of our own life. So we're continually expanding and growing, living from the inside out. Life is always seeking more life. This idea is we need to expand. We need to be in a higher value state to trigger the right chemicals. We can't just decide to live. We can't just say, "Oh, I'm going to live. I'm going to know that I'm healthy. I'm going to know that I don't have this illness anymore." I'm just going to know that I'm born to be immortal and I'm just going to be that. No, we need to feed what feeds life in our body. And what feeds life in our body is value. It's the value of identity, of knowing who we are. So we want to be expressing, not working. We want to be in inspiration. So working at it, making it happen, physically engaging is not what reverse goal setting is. Work is fear-based. Work, say, I'm going to make it happen, is fear-based. We want to move more into the passion. I'm going to be passionate about what's happening so that I can organically move away from the familiarity into freedom. I can't adapt new thought in old patterns. So I need to abandon that pattern and be focused on the new idea, right? That inhale and exhale. I like to think of that right brain as the inhale, inspiration, possibility, and the exhale as the left brain of bringing it into form. So it's that communication of bringing it back in and letting the body do what it naturally does. I want to talk about one more thing before I finish off today, and that's how the body works. We want to put the body back in its natural state. The body naturally heals, right? The body heals itself. You cut your finger, it heals. If you break a bone, it heals. Sickness is when we're doing damage to the body at a faster rate than it can heal. So skin cancer doesn't happen from one day in the sun, right? Lung damage doesn't happen from a single exposure to something toxic to it. Usually it's repeated. The body will heal. But we're usually doing damage at a faster rate than it can heal just by staying in the stress state. We just need to remember that sickness is an expression of not living in a value state. If we're sick at all, it means we're not living in the value state. But the good news is all we have to do is connect with that. The body, our life, will always reject what doesn't serve it. But we need to remember that pain is an alarm. Sickness is the body's attempt to expel what doesn't serve it, to get rid of it. This doesn't need to be work. We just need to realize the outside edges of who we are, of where we've been, of what our life is, of our imbalances, and even of sickness. The outside edges always die first. The old falls away or metabolizes, right? And so it's the outer edge. The core is what puts out that healing. So it is expressing right now, expressing. Think of that word, I express something. Think of it as more than just having an expression or anything like that, but from a physics perspective, that expression of something is the pushing out. And again, when we went through that list of expire versus inspire, it's ceasing to be valid. We need to remember that expression is the act of breathing out. But once we exhale, once we express, what we express ceases to be valid. I did a workshop where I was speaking about, I was using an apple tree as an example. Apple trees push the apples from inside themselves. They don't gather them from outside. They push them out. And then they drop them. And they don't think about them again. They're gone at that point. If they hold on to those apples, they rot. And we do that a lot. We do an expression that we were so enamored with that we hold on to it. But once we express it, once it's out, it's no longer value. So I want to do just a really quick thing. This is what I wanted to lead up to. Just a really quick thing with you. I want you to breathe out. Just exhale all the air from your lungs and hold it. Keep holding it. Holding it. This is suffering. To just sit there with the air outside of your lungs. Fear is staying in the past, trying to control the future. I'm going to say that again, but first I want you to breathe in now. Exhale again, and then breathe in one more time and really feel it. This is life. This is the difference between confidence and control. So I'm going to say those two things again. Exhaling. Fear is staying in the past, trying to control the future. Inhaling. Inspiration is the difference between the confidence and control. It's confidence, right? It's letting go of control. Letting go is good. That's what the body does all day long. It sheds. So we want to connect with the having vision, having faith, and just taking the steps. You have the vision, you have the faith enough to just take the steps. You're not creating the vision, you're not working at it, you're not willing it to happen. You're allowing yourself to be led on a journey one step at a time. This is the vision to mission exercise. So what we're going to do is we're going to connect this time with doing the practice I mentioned, and then of the campaigning that connects with the bees. And then we're going to also do another practice that is about connecting to that one step at a time concept. That's what we're doing. We're just organizing the insides to start expressing them and then get into the physical act of stepping forward. Not making it happen, but just saying, I will step from where I am one step forward into what I am next. So that is our session for this time. I hope you're enjoying the journey. I hope you're really connecting with this idea of not willing or working, but allowing. Just continue to breathe in. The out breath will happen organically. I will, again, be putting out exercises. There was an exercise with this. There will be another one coming out on the 28th. And then I will look forward to seeing you on May 5th for our next session. I hope everyone is having a beautiful day.